know you originally wanted to be an actor,
Mhm.
and then you found, okay, my drive is not acting. How do you know when something you're doing is not your drive? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that.
It wasn't that none of the decisions I have made in my life were made with the clarity of this isn't the thing I want to do, that's the thing I want to do.
Okay.
Or very few decisions were looked at as a cost benefit analysis
Sure.
of my creativity. I thought that I was in the drama club. I found my people in the drama club in junior high school and high school, and theater was really important to me. And as such, my dad knew some people, and a good friend of his was Charlie Kimbrough, who played Jim Dial on Murphy Brown, the newscaster. And Charlie got me my first agent and got me an acting job, and I did a few commercials here and there. And I pursued acting because I thought, I liked the idea of being famous when I was 16. That sounded awesome.
Forgivable, yeah.
Yeah, and I was okay at acting, and I went to Tisch School for the Arts at NYU for 6 months, only to see, I didn't realize it at the time, but what I was witnessing was a tremendous amount of commitment from a lot of people who were interested in the craft, and I wasn't intersecting with it as a craft. So, it's a long way of saying, like, by the time I was 19, and I was still doing some auditions here and there, I was like, I'm just not that into this.
Yeah.
So then I just sort of let it go.
You wanted like the result of acting, not necessarily to be like a good performer.
That is a great way to put it. I thought that being clever was good enough. And I did not know how to find a thing that was worth busting my ass for. And I didn't at all know really how to bust my ass.
Interesting. So you never thought like, okay, I've got to dive headfirst into this. But then it sounds like in the book you say follow your secret thrills.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like once you find this thing that you're really into, that's where you know, okay, I can bust my ass making this gun over and over.
So I am resistant to describing my path as instructive, even though it is instructive to me.
Yeah.
And there are many people in the world who have a clear idea. I have a niece who knows she wants to be an orthopedic surgeon.
That must be so nice.
For a long time.
Yeah, that must be nice.
I agree. But for me, it took me a lot of bouncing around in different industries and different things before I realized, and it was very specifically within special effects. So I had bounced around a bunch of different careers, from assistant animator to graphic designer, freelance graphic design. I moved to San Francisco in 1990 and just started working in theater. I worked in about 15 different theaters over 2 or 3 years. And that got me a reputation. And I was having a lot of fun in theater. I was learning a lot. I was learning stuff every week. I was becoming a much better carpenter, scenic painter, rigger, stage manager. I was finding that I liked thinking about a big picture enough that made me valuable to people that were hiring me. And that got the attention of Jamie Heidemann, who was running a small commercial TV commercial special effects shop in San Francisco at a place called Colossal Pictures. And so I was about 6 months into working with Jamie on Nike commercials and other small things when I realized, my after hours life is very different. And what I noticed was when I was working in theater, even when I was working all day long at Berkeley Repertory Theater and then heading over to Beach Blanket Babylon at night to do a shift there, that even when I was doing those long days, I was still coming home and working all night and making sculpture and making things in my art studio all night long. And about 6 or 8 months into working for Jamie, I realized I wasn't doing that anymore. I thought about it and I realized, oh, you know what? I'm getting all of the creative fulfillment that I get from coming home from doing theater work. I'm getting that at the job now.
Yeah.
And it's satisfying me on this really, really important creative level. Now, the special effects industry is packed with people who will tell you, who love the phrase or who say the phrase, I used to be an artist. And being the child of an artist and growing up with the experience of someone who structured their whole life around being able to do this one thing that they had to do, which was paint. I knew that it was more than, there was an importance to me of not saying I used to be an artist. that this was utilizing the same parts of my brain. And so what I realized though was that this is what a career could be.
Yeah.
And this was the first time that light sort of peeked through a window, and I was like, oh, a career is something you're both really good at, but kind of obsessed with all at the same time. And so then I thought, okay, great. I'm not going to say I used to be an artist. I'm just going to put all my energy into this stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you mentioned in the book that this is where your ideas come from, where you start getting engaged with something and passionate about something. We often dismiss that because we think we can't do anything about it. But it does segue nicely into this focused passion or this obsession.
We dismiss it. I think I dismissed it, certainly because my schoolmates were cruel about my passions, right? So like I was a nerdy kid and the things I liked were nerdy and I didn't share them with my peers because kids can be cruel. And I think middle school and high schools where a lot of people learn to subsume those things.
Sure.
Because our obsessions and the things we can't stop paying attention to, whether it's aliens or fan fiction about Twilight or Dungeons and Dragons or whatever it is, those obsessions make us vulnerable because they reveal us. They're showing people our bellies. And so to me, yeah, a lot of people don't pay heed to those things. And this book is my permission slip that when you do pay heed to those things that tickle at your head that you can't stop paying attention to, that I'd call sacred thrills, in my experience, I found myself in those things. Yeah. I found it was like a secret formula for self-actualization, self-realization.
It's important, I think, because a lot of us do overlook those things deliberately, or we dismiss them. Your idea that obsession is a necessary and healthy ingredient, I think, is music to a lot of people's ears, because a lot of us will get obsessed with something and we just think, oh, I shouldn't even like this, or I shouldn't focus so much on this because this is irrational, or nothing's ever going to come out of this. I'm just wasting my time, even though I can't stop thinking about it.
Exactly. And so many things don't get started because people think that. What is this worth? What am I going to get out of this? Or is this really, my hobby's weird. Should I really do it?
Yeah.
And the answer is, yeah, you really should. Because, and this is a specific because of this, which is that when you're obsessed with something, and let's say it's cosplay, and you see other people do it, and you're like, I would like to try that. Mm-hmm. Not sure that I should because it seems kind of weird and kind of freaky. Sure, it might be. In my experience, when I went towards that and started to assemble a costume, I realized, I have this very specific point of view about the kind of costume I want to wear, about the character, but also about the fidelity to the original. And I want to make this really accurate. And so again, diving into something where it has to fit within parameters that you've given it, that's, in my experience, that's pursuing your excellence. Mm-hmm. I need this to fulfill a thing for me. And I'm not sure what that thing is, but I'm going to go towards it. And when you're going towards something that's important to you, i.e. the stakes are high, the things you're going to confront along the way, your own biases, your own laziness, your venality, your jealousy, the things you're insecure about, that journey of going through that is understanding yourself. It's seeing yourself in a different light.
Yeah, I know about the authenticity for the costumes. I read about a suit of aluminum armor that was like 700 rivets and you wore it to school. And can you take us through that? Because this is like the portrait of a nerdy maker, obsessor guy. Yeah.
And I was really lucky in this story that my parents were the heroes that they were in affording me the time and the space and the encouragement. So in 1981, I was 14 and my dad took me to see Excalibur by John Borman. And it was really, really amazing and transformative experience for me. And it's still an amazing movie. It's super cheesy, and yet it earns its emotional stripes. It has some surpassingly weird and great moments in it. But the thing that I was really taken by was the armor. And there's over 100 suits of armor in the film of all different stripes. They all are part of the storytelling. They're not necessarily accurate to a specific time and place. They're more narrative devices, and they were all built by a man named Terry English in Cornwall, England, who is, to my mind, one of the best armor designers in movie history. And when I was 15, I saw that movie when I was 14. that Halloween, I made a suit of armor out of cardboard and wore it with a horse that attached to me with suspenders to high school. And then 2 years later, when I was 16, my dad and I got some roofing aluminum, and he taught me how to use a rivet gun, and we made me an aluminum suit of articulated armor with hinges and everything, straps. We cut apart suitcases to have straps that could strap it to my body. And I wore it to school and passed out in third period of heat exhaustion from wearing the suit. And that is exactly the portrait of the young, obsessed man. And sadly, that suit of armor got stored in the art room where the following summer, normally like a lot of stuff you left there was left over the summer. And some weird like bit of zeal, the principal of the high school went into the art room and threw out everything that was stored there. And so I lost that suit of armor to that summer cleaning.
That's
very upset.
That makes me just kind of, you want to shake that person and be like, you don't realize how much, you've never made anything, huh? You don't, like, because you look at something like that and you go, dang, that took somebody a long time.
I totally agree with that. And that guy who did that, he threw out a whole bunch of stuff that I had stored in the art room, and it was very upsetting to me. Yeah. Upsetting enough that I don't think I made stuff for another year or so after that. Like I felt so sort of gutted by the loss of all those sculptures.
Yeah, like gut punch. Yeah, like it just feels like, well, I can't make that stuff again, so what's the point? You lose your motivation. A lot of young guys like myself also would disassemble electronics and blow stuff up all the time. Until now, when you do that, I think they call the FBI. Back then in the 90s, though, they were like, oh, kids, just don't kill yourself, you know, or anyone else. I assume you were one of those kids too. But as I got older, I'm like, I'm scared to take apart certain things now. Like I got shocked by a tube in a television. I almost died, you know, and my friend almost died. I mean, it was like those tubes and those old TVs, they store a lot of power.
A huge amount of capacitance around the outer rim of a CRT screen.
Yeah, vacuum tubes. And like they were talking.
They'll dump a lot of electricity into you. It's not pleasant. I've been shocked that way before.
Yeah, it's something you remember. You ever take apart like a camera with a flash too? Man,
those capacitors are very strong.
That is a lesson that you will not forget. And I remember showing my shop teacher the flash stun gun that I made, and he's like, what happens when you get too much voltage going through that and you kill somebody? And I was like, that's not going to happen. He goes, come bring that to this doorknob over here. And he takes the wires and he hits the doorknob with these two copper wires that I have sticking out of this contraption, and they arc weld immediately to the doorknob. Yeah. And he goes, you know how much voltage and heat it takes to instantly liquefy copper and stick it to this doorknob? And I was like, no. And he's like, he tells me, he's like, this is 1800 degrees, probably a lot more.
Yeah.
Your skin can take like 120 of that and before it starts getting, and I was like, got it. So they put up with that stuff. But like I got older and I was like, oh, this shit can be dangerous. That just never happened to you.
Oh, no. I realized it could be dangerous. I got hurt by a lot of things I took apart. But there's this, and it's a natural kid impulse to take stuff apart. And it's really important, I think, as a parent to foment that if your kid has the proclivity, because if you take enough things apart, you start to understand how they go back together.
Yeah.
If you start to, it's not a direct lesson, but eventually structure starts to become clear. Like you open up your tape deck because it doesn't work, as I did, and you look down and there's a fuse. Oh, I didn't know there was a fuse in there, and it's fried. There's a space in there. So I go to the stereo store and I bring it. I'm like, "You have one of these?" And he's like, "Wow, yeah, I do." And pop it back in, and I fixed my tape deck, and I was 15, and I was like, I feel really awesome about that. Yeah. Robert Klein, the comedian, used to have this joke about like, why do we lift the hood of our car when it breaks down? Because we're expecting something to say, fix me. Like, is there something with a light on it?
Right.
And the answer is actually a non-zero portion of the time, there is something obviously wrong with something when you open it up.
Yeah.
And it's totally worth doing. And for those among us who actually fix stuff, I will tell you that one of the great secrets of fixing stuff is, I'd say 7 times out of 10, you can fix something by taking it apart and putting it right back together.
Yeah.
And that somehow just takes care of the issue.
You're cleaning gunk off stuff as you put it back in. You're resoldering things if you're doing stuff like that. You're tightening screws again. Mm-hmm. You're going, oh, that must have plugged in here. Yeah. But that's the thing that came unplugged when you dropped it off.
One imagines, but there's never anything super obvious, and yet you put it back together and like, oh, now it works.
Yeah. The problem is when you put it back together and you go, shoot, that was in there somewhere, and now it's on the table.
All those extra parts that Greg Brady left out.
Right, yeah. Like, if it's not a screw, you're probably screwed because
Exactly.
there's something that's not going to work. You mentioned that nothing is ever finished. Does that not drive you crazy? Because for me, that's like, I guess I'm a completionist in a way, which is why I identify with your checkbox thing, your obsession with lists and checkboxes. But the idea that nothing's ever finished, it makes me like get involuntary sort of chills thinking like, oh crap, something could be unfinished that you're going to work on still.
Well, it goes back and forth, and some things are totally done, but if it's something I'm really obsessed with, it's always an ongoing process. Like I was making Apollo suit parts for a spacesuit that is effectively done, and anyone looking at it would consider it complete and finished, except there's some parts that are resin that I want to be aluminum. So I'm slowly going back through it and kind of combing through and doing it. It's not to say I don't finish stuff. And as I say in the book, I use deadlines all the time to get stuff to a place where it's wearable or usable or demonstratable. And that's vital, because if I'm left to my own devices, I'll just peter away at the tiniest details forever. And all that being said, yeah, there are some things when I really love them, there's just always something else some final little detail to add.
You do mention the deadline thing. Do you set deadlines for yourself? Like, okay, this is going until Friday. After that, I'm done.
No, my deadlines are larger than that. It's usually like, I want to finish, actually, so I think a Comic-Con is coming up. What costume should I wear? And if it's one that I'm in the process of completing, I'll be like, great, that'll be the costume I finish in time. And then I work backwards from there and think, okay, these are the days I'm traveling, these are the days I'm in, I have these 5 days that I can put into it, I'm gonna need to bring in some help, and then I start to work outwards from there. So sure, there might be stuff where it's like, finish it by Friday, but hopefully I've been looking at the totality of the project, and like, I know that my due date is my due date, and I'll assemble what help and resources I need.
Okay, that makes sense. Because for me, everything I do always feels like, even preparing shows like this, all right, read the book. I always read the whole book. Watch or read or listen to 5, 6 other interviews that the person has done, so that I don't just ask them the same crap as everyone else, and also that I don't miss something awesome that's like, wow, this isn't in the book. But then I'll have like 8 pages of notes. I know I'm not going to get through everything, so then I have to trim stuff. And for me, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm running out of time. I'm reviewing this. Like, there's never enough time to finish everything perfectly.
Okay, and finishing everything perfectly is totally not the goal for me of a deadline. And it's actually an interesting thing to talk about here, because one of the reasons I love deadlines is because it hacks things off your decision tree and it takes things out of your build. In order to get X done by Friday, as you get closer and closer to Friday, you start having to leave behind things you thought you were going to get done. Okay, so let's say I was making an alien suit for Kane. Now, okay, I want this kind of communication. And you know what? I'm not going to get that done by Friday. I'm going to have to go with another style of communication, even though I had this grand plan about how I was going to talk to my crew while walking the floor at Comic-Con. And what a deadline does for me is, as I said, it lops branches off my decision tree. It makes me look at each thing I am looking to complete and ask myself, is this of the essence of the completion, or is it ancillary to the essence? Mm-hmm. And so I do a lot of interviewing other people, and I always find it terrifying. I sit there while they're talking, terrified, petrified I'm going to not have a follow-up question, or I'm somehow going to miss some area I wanted to talk about. So I do something similar when I'm interviewing people as I do with any other project, which is I read enough reference material until I sense that I have a point of view about the person that I'm interviewing.
Yeah.
And the moment I have a point of view, then there's all these questions that are general questions that I'm suddenly no longer interested in.
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't even matter to the interviewee. I interviewed Temple Grandin on stage a few years ago.
Nice.
She's an amazing human being. I joke that Jamie Heineman and I are the patron saints of autism spectrum disorder. And my opening for Temple was that if we're the patron saints, she's by all means the Pope. And I realized reading her book and looking at her material and reading stuff and actually speaking to her that she's really dedicated her whole life to alleviating suffering wherever she can find it. And that gave me this great lens with which to frame questions. And in the end, I said that to her in the interview on stage, and her response was, sure. And then she moved right on to the next answer. So it wasn't even like that uncovered some deep truth about Temple, but it helped me frame why I was there interviewing her. And it's true. I'm never going to assemble all the questions I want to ask. And frankly, some of the best interviews I've ever done were ones in which I wrote out 65 questions for John Cleese.
Oh my gosh.
And I never looked at a single one because he came so present and so ready to play that we went somewhere totally different.
Yeah.
And that to me gets really thrilling. I really enjoy that process.
Yeah, I like that process as well. And so these notes, people always go, what are you doing? And I'm like, crossing off things we're naturally getting to anyway without using it. But it helps me navigate and make sure that I'm not like, oh, shoot, I can't believe I forgot to ask about this amazing tip that was the one top thing. Because there'll be something in there that I think about for a week and then go, shit, I didn't ask.
The number of times I've concocted super elaborate questions for someone whose response was, well, I never thought of it like that. And then we're on to the next thing. And I've thought that we were going to get a real meaty discussion of comedy out of this. And that person has no interest in discussing it.
Yeah, you got to prepare more than you're going to use because nothing's worse than being like, crap, I figured that was a 14-minute block and we are at 32 seconds.
I've had people I've interviewed on stage where I usually do a question per minute. This is a sort of rough outline. Where I had 70 questions for a 60-minute interview, and I used all 70 questions.
Oh, wow.
The interviewee was so not interested in introspection, they made me work really hard.
Yikes, that's brutal. Everyone in the audience is just like, ooh,
there are people who might have been at that interview who know who I'm talking about. That's totally fine.
Yeah, they're still like nursing the beer that they had after that interview, I think.
No, they had a great time.
Yeah.
It just was a lot of heavy lifting for me.
Yeah. That's when you go home and you go, all right, I'm good enough that didn't totally explode in my face.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah. You are very self-aware. The book shows this, but in a lot of your interviews, it's really clear that you think a lot about how you think. And where does that come from?
I view that as one of our jobs as human beings, to watch ourselves, to watch the watcher and see and learn from the way we're doing things, because we do so many things wrong. I mean, we come to these conclusions about how the world works as we're growing up, and we're 5, 6, 7, we're 11, 12, 13. We're making decisions about the chaos we see around us and how to navigate it. And they might be good decisions in the moment, but they're terrible for navigating the rest of life. And yet, as far as I've found, I'm still operating on assumptions that I made when I was between 7 and 16 years old. That introspection comes from a family value. My mom is a psychotherapist. My father was in therapy for his whole life and read deeply about the philosophy of thinking and talked about that. My wife is a therapist. I've been in therapy for most of my life, and I'm a believer that talking and that introspection makes us better. It makes me a better person, a better citizen, a better father, a better husband, a better person. The examination. So there's a point in the book where I talk about having taken on a job that was too big for me, not realizing until way too late, not asking for help, ruining somebody's senior thesis film and losing a friend in the process. And when I called my dad in the midst of the darkest feeling of that, and he listened to me crying on the phone and feeling like crap, and I can't fix this, I can't make this better, there's nothing I can do. And he said, you can't fix this, you can't make it better. And that's true, and you have to accept that. You can only take this in and learn what it is about you that brought this about, to the degree that you're responsible, which is an important thing to rigorously examine, and try not to do it again. And in my family and among the people that I love, that is a value. That is a really important value, to see what you've done, how it didn't work and did work, and try and operate from a place of love and compassion for yourself, which gives you lots of love and compassion for other people. I mean, they really are. There's that quote at the beginning of Rounders where he says, if you're at a poker table and you can't spot the sucker, you're the sucker.
You're the sucker, yeah.
I've taken that on in life, where if you're driving around and everyone's an asshole, it's you.
Yeah.
That when you're in a bad mood, everyone seems like a jerk. And when you are unhappy with yourself or you're down on yourself, you're much more likely to get down on other people. So to me, that the love and compassion that I'm able to have for other people comes directly from how much I'm able to generate for myself.
Yeah, that's it. That point really hits home. You know, if you I went through a difficult sort of last year business thing, and I remember being like, I don't remember dealing with all this bull crap all the time. What is and I was like, okay. What would I say to somebody else? What's the common denominator in all these equations? Me. Oh, crap. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like having that realization early on is super helpful, because then you don't wonder why, quote unquote, life is unfair. You just go, okay, what part am I playing in this and how do I fix it?
Well, and that thing that you just said, getting to understand it early on, it's something that I keep trying to get over, because as far as I can tell, life is an endless series of me waking up and going, oh my God, I had no idea that was going on. And it's like combing. I'm at a professional place in my life now where if someone brings me a new project, even if it's in a genre or in a medium I don't know, if I'm interested in diving in, the process starts out as one of what I call smoothing down the high spots. It's like looking at the totality of the thing until I have a point of view. Right, the same thing I was talking about deadlines. And when I have a point of view, I can start to look and go, okay, there's a problem area, because that one sticks out to me as like slightly not fitting with the other stuff. So I sand that down, and then I look for another high spot. Okay, sand that. Now I'm bringing this thing into some, I'm being very abstract here. I recognize.
I think a lot of people understand what you mean, though. Or I understand some totally different point that you're not making. It's also possible.
It's just about the ways in which the things I understand about myself were like, there's half a dozen things I know about myself now that were mysteries to me 5 years ago. And there's things I understood then that were mysteries to me 5 years before. I cannot believe what an idiot I was 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
right? Like, it's just appalling.
I think you're supposed to feel that way at every age of your life,
and
right?
That is, it's really important that we recognize that in any given moment, whatever we think the world is, we're stupid about it. And we're going to learn more, and then we're still going to feel stupid from the vantage point of the future of that future moment. Just because to me, it's an endless set of stairs in the best way. I mean, there's something really, that mission to open my eyes wider and to be more present with the people that are important to me. That's one of the hardest jobs of being a person, and it's the most important one.
I want to do a quick piece of YouTube only content before I forget, because I always forget that. So we'll do it right in the middle of the show here. If you're looking for our YouTube, jordanharbinger.com/YouTube is where you can find it. And this will be a separate clip. You were in a relationship fight or some sort of conflict. I think this is from a book or some other article. And you said, what is this imaginary movie audience that's watching us have this conflict think of me right now?
Okay, so yeah, I was having an argument with a girlfriend, and we were being crappy with each other, like you do sometimes, and we were saying mean things to each other in this argument, and we were lashing out. That's what it was. And I was sitting there in silence as this room had the heaviness of our anger in it, and I was thinking, I don't know any way to get out of this situation. I have no idea what to say to change what's happening, but what's happening feels totally untenable. And then I thought, okay, just as a thought experiment, what if I could change it? What if I could wave a magic wand? What if I was a screenwriter and this was a scene? Oh, okay, this is an interesting frame from which to think about this problem. What if this was a scene in a movie? I'm watching it, but I'm also the screenwriter, and I'm the star, right? Because it's my movie.
Sure.
I'm the writer. Well, if I'm the audience, I've just lost me. Because my character's a jerk. He just said this lashed out thing, and he's mad, but he doesn't mean it. And my audience no longer care. I, as the audience, no longer care about this character. But he's the hero of the movie. How do I bring the audience back? What can the character do here to redeem themselves? And I realized, to speak the truth without a goal in the room, which is to say, I said to my girlfriend, I'm really sorry about what I just said. I'm scared and I'm angry and I'm lashing out, but I didn't mean anything I just said. And I wasn't hoping for a specific type of response to her. I was simply speaking the truth to the situation. And I was backing up a bit and being a little more meta about how I was in the room. And that frame was so important to me. And there's a Buddhist idea of watching a watcher, of lifting off and seeing yourself as a person moving through the world and the actions you're taking and kind of witnessing from afar. That I find really, really useful in monitoring my patterns, monitoring the ways in which, I feel when I'm activated or when I'm happy. All of these yield different emotions, they yield different physical sensations. And the more I understand about how I react to things in context, the better I'm able to weather the vicissitudes of life. Seriously, it's that simple.
I think that's a brilliant strategy, even if you're just going back to the pure technique without the overlaying philosophy, to go, oh crap, I painted myself into a corner. We're butting heads right now. How do I get this imaginary audience back on track and on my side? Okay, rewrite the script and then act it out. It sounds manipulative or mechanical, but it's a great way to think about a specific type of
I agree with you that it sounds manipulative and mechanical, and it actually, I want to make a distinction here because there is certainly a part of me. I grew up in a chaotic household. I am definitely someone who has suffered their whole life believing that there's a secret set of actions I can perform that will make everything go right. And nothing has caused me more harm in my life than that belief. And I'm still trying to excise it from my programming. What I was doing in that moment of shifting back and thinking of myself as the screenwriter of the scene wasn't trying to concoct a magic series of actions that would quote unquote fix the situation. I really was trying to watch myself from Tara Brach is a Buddhist teacher who would say, try and watch yourself with a wise, detached, loving presence.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can do that to ourselves 5 years ago. We can look at ourselves 5 years ago and say, yeah, I can see the degrees to which you were sad about that thing and that didn't work out the way you planned and that's why you said that thing. But it's so hard to do that in the moment.
Oh, yeah.
But the shorter I can make that distance from the Dharma has given me a lot over my life. There's another Buddhist precept that between stimulus and response is all of our free will. And that is between someone saying something, let's say someone says something crappy to you and you have an emotional reaction and it puts a feeling in your chest and puts a heat in your head and you now have the choice about the next thing that you say.
Yeah.
So there's the stimulus and there's the response. And when I can take the time to not make that response an autonomic emotional response, but one based on really trying to see the wider situation for what it is, I am much happier with how those things go. And it doesn't mean that it's conflict-free at all. It means that sometimes I go towards conflict because that's where healing is going to happen, especially with people that I love and respect.
When you build things, you say you build them in your head and the rest is like cutting the chunks. But walk me through this a little bit. Because are you going, okay, I'm going to make this, so I'm going to need this tool. This is the material. I assume you're doing at least that. But how detailed is the visualization? Like, are you thinking like, all right, well, when I'm doing that, I'm tightening that. Ooh, you know what? That's probably going to break because I'm going to have to tighten it enough where that's not going to do it. So I need a washer.
There is a lot of that. There's a lot of that. Well, so I'll give you an example. So you do a podcast. How many podcasts do you do a year?
Like 160.
Okay. So when you think back to the first time you were making a list to make a podcast, you had almost zero institutional knowledge of your own.
Sure.
You were relying on a whole bunch of other people's. But after 50 or 60, and then after a couple of hundred, you build this body of institutional knowledge that understands on a much deeper level than you could have possibly imagined at the beginning about what are the important aspects of this that you really have to button down. You probably in the first few podcasts wasted time taking care of stuff that really doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah.
And you've learned, yeah, that one doesn't matter. That one does. This one matters if we have time, but no one's going to notice if it's not there.
Right.
And knowing which questions to ask is everything about expertise. And so there becomes a point at which that that knowledge becomes almost like a body memory, right? Like you now have this thing where the podcast, instead of a set of separate actions that are overwhelming, it now has this arc to it. Like, okay, I know in the beginning there'll be this, then there'll be this, then there'll be this, then there's the interview, and then there's the stuff after the interview, right? Like all of a sudden it becomes sort of coalesced like a thing you can almost see in your head. And I think of this like, I had a roommate who was a serious chess player, and I played a few hundred games of chess with him, thinking I was going to get better at chess. And I bought chess tricks and tips and traps and techniques, and I bought books on chess. I bought a chess computer and played chess. And reading about chess and playing a few hundred games taught me I was never going to be a great chess player because no matter how much I tried, the board was still a set of separate actions to be analyzed in and of themselves. And I realized that a real chess player starts to see the board as a gesture, so that they see that gesture and they can actually separate it into the available moves to them, or they can look at it as this thing. And so I submit that in anything one can become an expert in, that expertise carries with it a kind of a physical understanding of the thing. So I think that there's it's a phase, not a phase, or it's almost like a plateau you reach with an expertise where, yeah, you can do a lot of the work internally before you lift a tool or a pen or start to actually do research. You see, I'm sure if somebody said, you've got to interview Barack Obama and you've got 2 hours, or you've got to interview Barack Obama and you've got 2 months.
Yeah.
Those are going to be two very different lengths of time with which to do. But you'd be a lot less afraid of that from the vantage point of 200 podcasts than the vantage point of 2.
Yeah.
So all of that is an extremely long way of saying, yeah, a lot of my building happens mentally. A lot of the problem solving happens mentally, so that I can get to a point where I can get enough materials in front of me to start to build it for real. And I encounter plenty of problems on the bench that I didn't think of in my head. But a lot of that, it especially happens when I hit a snag and I can't figure out how to solve a problem. I will let it be, and then I'll go off and I'll think about it for a while. And sometimes I'll think about it for weeks, and then the answer will be like, there it is. And I'll be like, oh my God, what a dummy, of course. That was the answer all along, and it's totally simple.
And thinking about things like that and then running into these little snags reminds me, when I was an exchange student in Germany in the 90s, I would start to dream eventually in German, and I would wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh, I woke up. Oh, because somebody was talking and then used a word, but I don't know the word. So I would have to keep a dictionary near the bed, because I would run into like what you have, like a problem, and I'd go, I don't have anything mapped to that. He was going to say, I need to run into the phone booth. And I'm like, how the hell do you say phone booth? And I'd have to look up the word. I'd go back to bed, and my dream would sort of start right around there and then continue.
Fascinating.
So your brain is constantly running into these things when you simulate.
Well, and I actually think that the language analogy is a really good one. I think that materials are languages. Building is a language, and the specific materials are words that people don't know. The vocabulary of, I tweeted recently about Chicago screws as a way to hold stuff together, and all these people tweeted back to me, I didn't know what a Chicago screw was. Thank you for that. Because they looked it up, and there it is on Amazon. And if you know the name, it's also called a paper rivet. They're also called blind rivets sometimes, even though that's not the technical term for a blind rivet. And for me, when you know those secret words, you know all of these other solutions. So I love trading those little things. Again, they're vocabulary words for making.
Yeah. It's just fascinating.
I actually think of it. I came up with calling it Rumpelstiltskin, because I was replicating a prop and I was trying to find this tiny little bottle, and it's made of glass and it's about 1 inch long. And if you want to search for bottles on Google, the noise to signal ratio is 1.
Oh, yeah.
Little bottles. So I thought dram bottles, no. Perfume bottles, no. Perfume samples, no. Apothecary, no. Homeopathy. Every last term I could think of about people who used small bottles, I searched for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then I bought some bottles. I bought lots of old bottles, so I could look at them and see if anyone. And then I started doing research on bottles themselves. This is where I should have actually started this whole process, because I discovered that bottles are classified by the type of lip.
Get out.
Seriously.
Really? That's
so
surprising.
if you want to find a specific type of bottle, you need to first identify the lip type, and then the rest falls into place. And so I looked at the bottle I was trying to find, and it had a specific kind of square lip. It's called a patent lip. And so then I was like, okay, I'd already determined that the bottle held 1 dram. Right, I made the math of the conical interior. I'm sorry, the cylindrical interior. Okay, 1 dram. So I searched 1 dram patent lip. Hundreds of results of precisely the bottle I've been looking for months. And once I understood its name, like Rumpelstiltskin, I cracked its spell, and it had no power over me.
So satisfying to do that.
Oh my God, one of the best things that's ever happened.
And you're like, ooh, eventually AI is going to know what I want, even if I don't know what I want, which will be really useful and scary.
I'm not sure AI is ever going to get that smart.
It would be great though sometimes, but then also terrifying because you're like, how did you know I was out of toilet paper? You're a really capable guy. You have a ton of skills. And one thing that this show's done for me is put me around people like you and others on a regular basis. And of course, the problem then with this is that if you're listening to this show or watching this show, it can really seem like, as a listener or a viewer, you're the only person in the world that isn't knocking it out of the park. Like, oh, Jordan's got all these great shows. And then Adam Savage, man, that guy's I am a turd. All I'm doing is I'm becoming a pharmacist. I'm never going to make anything out of my life's so ordinary. And it's imposter syndrome.
It's imposter syndrome. It's also what the Buddhists call comparing mind.
And I live there sometimes. And it's such a freaking recipe for disaster.
It is. It is a recipe for disaster, but it's also totally human. So, you know, my shop, while it is a wonderland that I've spent years putting together, I took it apart earlier this year to use all the things in it for the show I just made for the Science Channel. And as such, I put it back together over the last couple months, but it's still not fully flowing. It's still not quite there. So today I was in my shop and I was messing around and it was not going very well. And that happens no matter where you are in your career, no matter who you are, how much success you've had. I think there's this other aspect to it, which is deeply American, which is the scarcity model, which is that everything I'm given would come at a cost to somebody else, or everything someone else has is a cost to me.
Yeah.
But that imposter syndrome, it is so vital to me to talk about it openly and to share stories about it, because nobody escapes it. Every single human you have ever met experiences it all the time. And, you know, on a day-to-day basis, my life does not feel like a productive juggernaut of endless glee.
Yeah.
It is another life like anybody else is living. And I have, you know, wonderful people in my life who I love, and I have difficult people in my life, and I have, you know, trials and tribulations like anybody else. That it's one of the things I love about Mark Maron in his podcast, is that he's so forthcoming about his own difficulties, that he brings about in his guests the same amount of introspection. And my tale about imposter syndrome, I was having lunch a few years ago with someone my age, and I mentioned imposter syndrome, and they said, wait a minute, what is that thing you just said? And I said, the feeling that you don't belong where you are, even if you're successful, and that someone's about to come out and tap you on the shoulder and tell you it's time to go home.
Right.
And he just turned sheet white, and he said, I thought it was.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And it made me so sad that he'd spent 45 years of his life thinking that he was the only one that suffered this, and somehow everyone else was escaping it.
Yeah.
And nobody else escapes it. It's just so universal and so important that we talk about that, because, you know, I've met people that don't think that they're an imposter, and they're interminable to be with.
Well, it's a running theme on the show, the imposter syndrome thing, because of the high performance element of the show. But yeah, if you want to meet somebody who doesn't have imposter syndrome, go talk to a high school freshman or sophomore or senior, because they know everything and their life is going to be amazing. But it's actually the mark of a high performer. I was in law school, and I remember somebody came in and spoke, and all these other people that talk about imposter syndrome, they go to like Harvard, Yale, medical, whatever, and they're like, who here feels like they're the one that slipped through the cracks and it's only a matter of time? And all the hands go up. But if you ask it, in a room full of people who are not doing much of anything or are really young, they'll be like, what are you talking about? It happens when you are around all of these people who are killing it because you are probably supposed to be there killing it too. Because it does, in a way.
Because we also live in a culture where we love the end of a story being happily ever after.
Well, yeah,
we just assume that. I talk about, that is a very cultural thing, the happily ever after. Oh, you were on TV once. You should be fine and rich forever.
Yes.
And the answer is no, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, just ask Pauly Shore. But that does also drive me to be better. There is an element of imposter syndrome where I'm like, okay, look, I got to watch 7 other interviews you did, read the entire book, and say to myself, I got to crush this one, or he's going to go, why am I wasting my time? Or I'm going to go, man, I wasted that opportunity with Adam Savage. I should have just done more work. I should have done this, And Conan O'Brien actually was talking with Howard Stern about this last week or about it. And it was awesome to hear both of them go, yeah, I pretty much always get mad at myself after a show, or I pretty much always think, oh, I should have done this again, or I should have done this a different way.
You feel like you leave money on the table.
Yeah.
It's never done. It's never complete. And frankly, every single time I have experienced the emotion, oh man, I've got this wired, life was rearing up with a big fat open hand to smack me across the face with humility and disaster.
Yeah.
Every last time. It's uncanny.
I know that your father did some Sesame Street Muppeteer.
He did not do Muppeteer. This is a thing I cannot.
It's freaking on Wikipedia.
I was
like, they don't call that Muppeteer, do they? Like, that's Muppets.
I've asked people to remove it. I've pulled it. I've flagged it. My dad was not a Muppeteer.
Okay.
My dad was an animator. And when Sesame Street started in the late 60s, early 70s, their axiom was 1/3 puppets, 1/3 live action, and 1/3 animation. And this was groundbreaking for a kid's show, as it was and still continues to be. And my dad was one of the very first animators they hired. And so he raised us doing animated interstitials on Sesame Street. He did about 2 or 3 a year through all of the 70s.
And how did he encourage you to be creative? And by the way, it's going to be off your Wikipedia after this, because I think you saying, hey, that's wrong is
We'll
see.
I've
see,
mentioned
though.
it before.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. How did he encourage you to be creative?
Well, watching him paint every day imbued me with the understanding that this thing had a value, and a really abiding and life-affirming value to him. And I mean, he was by no means uncomplicated, and it was a very chaotic childhood that I had. But that example of someone painting every single day, someone who put that much value onto this weird thing. Mm-hmm. And I submit that everything that we do everything we do as a hobby, everything that we have to do is a weird hobby. I mean, fishing is weird when you think about it.
I agree with that.
They don't have to be utilitarian.
Yeah.
And so every time I explored, making something, my parents were encouraging about it. They liked it. They did not, it's encouragement. Telling your kid when he's starting to sing that he's singing off key is a really, really shitty thing to do to a kid. You've got to let people have an open space with which to try and iterate and what they might think of as failing in order to find whether or not they're going to love that thing. And my parents definitely gave me that.
You have twin sons. How are you encouraging them to create without putting unhealthy pressure on them? And I worry because I've got my new baby coming soon, and I put unhealthy pressure on myself. So it's going to be really hard not to put it on other people who I love.
I resolved very early to put the things they were interested in front of them and make the materials and things that they were curious about available to them. So I bought a lot of drum sets and guitars and things that didn't get used, but I also bought a lot that did. My kids are both very accomplished musicians. They're kind people. But it's not like honestly, I mean, I don't know if it's the frame of this question, which tends to carry the assumption that I may have done something right, is still not something I'm convinced of. Raising children is a lifelong exercise. And even though my boys are 20, I'm still smack in the middle of it.
Yeah.
I try to speak to them openly. I try to, in my whole family, work hard to understand the family dynamics. There are dynamics between me and my kids. There are dynamics between each of us and our families. both our parents and our partners and our kids, that we can even know about and might not be able to change. But just knowing about them so that you can talk about them and you can normalize these experiences is really, really important.
I was talking with Penn Jillette on the show before, and he had mentioned, thought, oh, well, you work with this other guy, Teller, for a long time. You guys must be really close. And he was like, no, we are not friends.
No.
And I actually heard that similar to them, you and Jamie were not or are not friends. And I'm surprised, but I get it also because I've been through that similarly. I guess we just assume if we see people together all the time, they have to be getting along.
Yeah.
And
it's not. It actually is and I think Penn and Teller are both good friends, and they would say the same thing that Jamie and I would say, which is there's a real strength to a partnership that doesn't have an emotional component. We're not afraid to hurt each other's feelings, which means we're not afraid to go to the carpet go to Matt on the things that we think about each other. When we think someone's being full of shit, we'll say it, and consequently, that relationship's one of the most satisfying relationships I have had with Jamie. We fought about the small stuff constantly, but we really never fought about the big. We never fought about the big stuff. We never fought about turning down large sums of money to bust myths about somebody's product or other. And the lack of the emotional component, it was a real strength, because of the fact that we could concentrate on what's in front of us better.
Yeah, this makes sense.
I mean, it's also one based on a deep amount of respect. So while Penn and Teller aren't necessarily two people who would go out to dinner together, although, you end up sharing a lot of meals with your business partner. And the same thing is true for me and Jamie. We've never had dinner alone together in the 30 years.
It's just so crazy. When I heard that, I was like, how can that be the case?
But the respect that I have, knowing that Jamie would have been able to get this build done by the end of the day, no matter what I think of the technique he's about to dive into, that respect is really paramount. So, the difficulties we had were never based on a lack of respect for each other. And we never lashed out and were insulting with each other. We fought bitterly about stuff, but it never got personal.
Yeah.
And that's really important, because also when you're business partners with someone, like it or not, you're going to be intimate in their lives in a way that's abiding and deep, even if they're not your friend. Jamie and I know things about each other's lives that few other people in our lives know, just because we've shared that over those decades.
I can imagine companies coming at you, speaking of turning down large sums of money, like, all right, make sure we're going to bust the myth that Brawny isn't the toughest paper towel. Yep. And you're like, no, I'm going to not sleep at night.
And early on, we would get these, and we realized, wow, so basic cable is that you don't get residuals. So we got paid for making MythBusters, and we never make another penny from the enterprise, which is fine. That's the rules. Yeah. That's how those contracts go. But it also means that the only thing I have when Jamie and I realized this early, the only thing we would have when we finished was our integrity. And that was a coin not to be spent unwisely.
Sure.
Because, you could just become Bob Vila, and you could become what I consider kind of a joke about making stuff, because, there was a period of time when it seemed like there was not a product he wouldn't stump for. So I have no idea what to believe. He just seems like a product endorser.
Yeah.
I haven't deeply researched Bob Vila. He's probably a lovely man, and I don't mean to insult him.
He seems like a nice guy.
I'm merely talking about the fictional Bob Vila that is a cultural symbol in my head. I don't mean to insult the actual human being.
That loves everything that Kmart produces or whatever it was.
But we realized that we were going to do that if it mattered to us, and if we believed in what we were doing, then we would take the money and we would do a thing about somebody's product.
Yeah.
And we did a lovely one for Corning, wanted to do this set of videos called A Day of Glass. And it was one of the most delightful things, because Corning is such a fantastic company, and everything you could think of to do with glass, they kind of invented it, starting back in the 19th century. It was like this unfettered, easy decision to make, because it's like, well, there's no problem with this company at all. There's no hidden skeletons. They didn't build Nazi warships or something like that, and this is awesome.
Yeah. Or they just did a really awesome cover-up no one's ever going to crack it open.
Exactly.
Because you couldn't find it. The show, I was looking for interesting tidbits about the show, and there's stuff in there like a woman saved her own life and that of her infant because she had fallen into a ditch.
Underwater car.
Yeah, the underwater car. And then I found some way that you guys had accidentally found a really easy way to make an explosive out of a very common chemical, and ended up like censoring that and then telling DARPA, the Defense Department, essentially.
Yep. And they were like, yeah, we know about that. Thank you for not telling anybody.
Yeah, thanks for not putting it on a really popular cable show. But the one that really stuck out was the cannonball accident.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about the cannonball accident? That's one where I bet every sphincter in your body was clenched at max while you waited for the outcome of that.
It was awful. So it happened out at the Alameda County Sheriff's bombing range, where a cannon was being fired to test the speed of the cannonball. And there were a bunch of safety procedures put in place, but it was hard to, Jamie and I had fired cannons into the same hill before. And we'd used this basically, 200-foot tall mountain, this tiny hill, as a backstop for cannon shots before. However, when this cannon was being shot, it was in the middle of the 6-year drought that Northern California had. And so this hill, far from receiving the cannonball, was hard as a rock. And the cannonball bounced off the hill, flew a mile into Dublin, California, and bounced off a sidewalk, went up through the lintel of this man's house, passed through the bedroom of his sleeping wife and child.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Flew another 1,000 feet, landed on the roof of somebody else's house, broke some tiles off of it, bounced into the passenger seat of an SUV that had been parked there 5 minutes before. And nobody was hurt. Now, we started to get calls immediately. I got a call within an hour from Australia. And it taught me this. The first lesson I learned from this is that no reporter you've ever done an interview with has ever thrown out your number.
Yeah.
They're ready to call you if they have that access. Number two is that the story that's going to have the most traction is the one people are secretly expecting. And the story from MythBusters of the idea of an experiment gone wrong and someone getting hurt, it just was like this perfect dovetail of people's secret desire for MythBusters, because it seems kind of dangerous. So shouldn't something dangerous happen at some point? With the like, oh my God, that totally happened. So then the very first thing Jamie and I wanted to do was head out there and talk to the people whose property and their safety felt compromised by this accident. And we wanted to apologize to them. So we did. And we apologized to all the people this happened to. We made good on restoring their homes and their property to as good or better than it was before. Each of the people we talked to requested that whatever safety procedures we had in place, we make them more robust. Yeah. And that is an absolutely reasonable request, and we promised them that. And in fact, those safety procedures are still ones that I follow today in production. Luckily, we learned that without anyone having to get hurt. And then we walked out of the house of one of the people whose house was hurt by the cannonball to a press conference. And I have never experienced this before. 20 microphones sitting there in a big holder, and this bank of reporters with their trucks all ready with questions. And my brain did this really funny thing. I'm walking out towards this, and I'm thinking, oh, look at that holder for all those microphones. It's this big chunk of aluminum, about 1/2 inch thick, with radiused edges, and a port for all these different microphones. That is a machine shop built that thing. Yeah. They built it for that purpose. It can't be a big market. It can't be a huge market. It's got to be this limited thing. It's probably going to cost like $1,200. So every news, I started wondering, literally all the way walking, I'm thinking this, does every news truck have one? And whose do they use for any given press conference? Is it the first guy to show up, the first person? So I'm just like sort of, one of my ways of relaxing is looking at things and imagining how they got built. Like imagining the first meeting, the design meeting, the iterations, the process, the manufacturing, etc. And this was no different. So then I stand up at the mic, Jamie and I stand, and people are like, the reporters are asking. At first, it's this very cacophonous, okay, what's your question? How did that guys feel about it? Okay, and we started to answer questions, and we were answering them honestly. There was nothing to hide here. We had nothing to obfuscate. This mistake was made on our watch. We were responsible, and we were taking that responsibility. And within like 6 questions, the whole energy became like diffused to the point of like it became a real quiet press conference, and people asked like 3 or 4 more questions, then everyone was like shrugged and went like, all right, I think we got what we need.
Yeah.
And it was another lovely lesson that if you to make a story not like both Jamie and I, actually all 5 of us, Carrie, Grant, Tori, Jamie, I, our production team, our producers, our production company, all of us were mortified by this. And this is, for us, the darkest day of MythBusters.
Yeah, I mean, you could have killed a woman and a child with a
Absolutely, it was
cannonball.
awful, absolutely awful. And we're still, you know, if I am talking to a large audience and someone says cannonball and people laugh, I tell this story as a way of saying there's nothing funny about that. I get the humor, and I get how that humor dovetails with your vision of MythBusters, but the fact is nothing was funny about it. And we weren't treating it as something we were trying to hide, obfuscate, or divest responsibility of. And that meant that, you know, the reporters were like, all right, I guess that's about it.
Yeah. All right. So you tell me about this Iron Man suit, because I know this is coming up, but like this thing is next
insane.
level.
It's totally insane. So this is for this new show I have called Savage Builds. It starts airing on June 12th on the Science Channel after BattleBots. And we were in production on this show from January through April of this year. And the very first episode, we built a working suit of Iron Man armor out of 3D printed titanium. Kevin Feige, the head of the Marvel group, gave me personal permission to get the original computer files of the Iron Man Mark II suit from Shane Mahan at Legacy Effects, the guys that have built all the Iron Man suits and made tons of incredible armor costumes for the Marvel and countless other films. And we worked with the Colorado School of Mines, which is in Mines with an N.
Yes.
It's an incredible engineering school.
Not mimes.
Not mimes.
Yeah.
Everyone makes that joke.
Yeah,
An incredible engineering school. And the best part about it was it just grew out of me having done an appearance at the School of Mines and them saying, hey, we've got this whole new additive manufacturing department. They literally built an entire building to teach kids about additive manufacturing, 3D printing. And they said, we just got this new titanium printer. Got anything you want to make with it? And when we were in pre-production on the show, it's like, maybe we should make some Iron Man armor. And I called them up. And EOS, the makers of that machine, donated all the 3D printing, which is good because it was well over $250,000 worth of printing. But the end result is, if Tony Stark became non-fictional, if you could wave a magic wand and Iron Man needed to make a suit, this is the process by which he would start. We made, I consider, a working prototype of an Iron Man armor suit. It is bulletproof.
Sweet.
There is some flying.
Did you test that?
It was it was so much fun and such a wonderful thing to dive all into this fantasy. Oh, because it turns out that plate titanium has a certain kind of strength, but if you 3D print it, you're actually laser sintering layers of powdered titanium onto previous layers. And this means that you can use the lasers to attenuate the internal crystalline grain structure of the titanium and make it much stronger than normal titanium.
What?
So it's even like, I didn't know that when we started, but by the end of the episode, we were like, yeah, this is not a fantasy armor. This is a working prototype of the fantasy armor made real.
How do you know it's bulletproof?
You'll have to watch the episode.
Okay,
to find that out.
and I assume how do you know it flies is also
again, I've got to leave something on the
Hey, I'm
something
in.
for people to tune into and watch.
I'm in. Thank you very much. It's been
my
amazing.
absolute pleasure.